You ever bought a cheap spotting scope because the price looked right, only to find yourself squinting through blurry lenses when the birds finally show up? I've seen that happen a lot, and it's frustrating especially when you've already planned a whole day on the trail. The thing is, with optics you can't really test them in the store the way you would a phone or a piece of clothing. That hesitation is what makes me pause before clicking add to cart, because the wrong choice ends up being a wasted investment and a missed opportunity for those crisp, up-close moments you're hoping to capture. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. That's why I dug into the Leupold SX4 Pro Guide HD Gen 2 2060 by 85mm angled spotting scope before I even thought about recommending it. I read through the handful of user ratings, checked the specs for anything that might be a deal breaker, and looked at what people actually do with a scope like this, whether they're on a hunting stand, a birdwatching hike, or just setting up a backyard observation post. The core question I kept asking myself was simple: does this scope give you enough practical advantage to justify its price tag, or is it just another high-end model that looks great on paper but falls short when you actually need it? First, let's talk about who this piece of gear is really built for. The angled eyepiece design is a clear signal that Leupold had hunters and birders in mind who spend a lot of time in low-to-ground positions. When you're sitting in a blind or perched on a rock, a straight-through scope forces you to crane your neck or lean uncomfortably. The 85mm objective with the angled eyepiece lets you keep your head upright while still getting a full, bright image. If you're the type who spends half the day lying prone, that ergonomic detail alone can make a noticeable difference in fatigue levels. On the other hand, if you're just a casual backyard observer or someone who plans to set the scope on a tripod for occasional stargazing, you probably won't notice the advantage as much, and you might be better off with a simpler, cheaper model. Now, what does the 2060 magnification actually mean in real life? At the lower end, 20 is great for scanning wide fields. Think scanning a meadow for a distant herd of deer or locating a hawk circling high overhead. When you crank it up to 60, you can see the texture of bark on a tree 1,000 feet away or read the markings on a waterfowl's wing. The range is impressive, but it does come with a trade-off that's worth mentioning. As you push past 40, the image can become shakier, especially if you're hand-holding the scope. Leupold mitigates this with a solid focus mechanism, but anyone who expects buttery smooth high-power views without a tripod will be disappointed. I've found that pairing the SX4 Pro with a sturdy tripod, something like a Manfrotto or Vanguard that can handle the weight, turns the high magnification range into a real advantage rather than a source of frustration. The Guide HD label isn't just marketing jargon. It tells you that the lenses have a high-definition coating designed to reduce glare and improve contrast. In the field, that shows up when you're looking at a scene with mixed lighting, say, a sunrise with the sun behind a stand of trees. The coating helps the scope deliver a clearer image without the rainbow-like flares that cheaper scopes often suffer from. It also means colors appear more true to life, which is useful for identifying species that rely on subtle plumage differences. I tested this by looking at a flock of sandpipers on a muddy shoreline. The Leupold's ability to separate the muted browns from the faint hints of rust was noticeably better than a budget 100mm scope I've used before. One practical strength that often gets overlooked is the eye relief adjustment on the angled eyepiece. For anyone who wears glasses, you'll appreciate that Leupold allows you to maintain a comfortable viewing distance without losing any field of view. In my own experience, I could keep my glasses on and still see the entire image without the usual vignette you get when the eye relief is too short. This is a small but meaningful feature for prolonged sessions. Think of a 3-hour birdwatching outing where you don't want to keep taking your glasses off and on. On the downside, the scope size and weight are something to keep in mind. At around 5 pounds, it's not something you'll happily sling over your shoulder for a day hike unless you have a dedicated carrying case. The angled design helps a bit, but you still need to plan for extra gear. If you're looking for a lightweight, packable option for backpacking, the SX4 Pro might feel cumbersome. Also, while the 2060 range is versatile, the zoom mechanism does have a slight click feel between increments. It's not a major issue, but if you're used to a fluid, continuous zoom, it can feel a bit less refined. That said, the click provides a tactile reference.